Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. 2019 was one of the worst years we've ever seen for diseases in crops all around the United States. It was terrible. But we're going to talk today about how you can improve the situation going into next year. How can you reduce disease issues on your farm?
It was also a challenging year to get phosphorus applied to many fields. We're going to talk about fall applications versus spring applications and give you a strategy for your farm.
Coming up later in the show, we have an iron talk and we get a tough weed of the week as well. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
The last thing you want after harvesting your grain is to spoil it before it goes to market. The Grain Temp Guard from Farm Shop MFG is a low-cost bin monitoring solution that tracks temperature and humidity and alerts you when conditions exceed safe thresholds. Visit farmshopmfg.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about herbicide carryover for next year. Now, if you are a non-farmer, the reason why we're talking about this a little bit is just so you understand a little bit about how herbicides work in general. And let me first say, with most of the herbicides that we're using on the farm today, they're actually quite safe for humans and for the environment. Many of these products are what we would call natural products. The most popular corn herbicides today are HPPD herbicides. So again, HPPD, and these got discovered because there was a researcher who had a tree and there were no broadleaf weeds around this tree. And he thought, I wonder if there's something in the tree killing these weeds. Well, he discovered that and called the product Callisto, and that was the origin for a lot of these HPPD herbicides.
Well, for any of these pesticide products to come out, it takes years of study, tens of millions of dollars worth of research to prove that it's safe and prove how long does this product have to have before it's safe for the next crop and so forth. So they determine what the rotational intervals will be before future crops. So for example, if you apply that HPPD on time and you've got a whole year before the next crop gets planted, well, no problem if you're rotating to corn or rotating to soybeans, for example. But let's say that the year turns out like 2019 and the crop goes in 2 months late and the herbicide application goes on 2 months late. Now all of a sudden farmers may have to adjust what they rotate to.
Yes, we had delayed planting, we had delayed spraying in 2019, but we also had a lot of rainfall. What we usually are looking for with herbicide breakdown is a moderate amount of rainfall and lots of heat, because the number one thing that's going to break herbicides down in the soil is bacteria. And bacteria want heat, they want lots of heat, and they want just a normal amount of rainfall. Now, if there's too much rainfall, one of our concerns this year is soils were sitting plumb full of water. Well, if soils are plumb full of water, that means there's no oxygen in there, and that means that many of the bacteria that could break the herbicide down will die. So that could be a concern going into next year.
Well, it absolutely could be, Brian. I don't know how to quantify that exactly for farmers, but I can say this. If you've got a herbicide that has a 10-month rotational restriction to the crop that you want to plant next year, and all of a sudden you got it applied late, the weather went against you, your soils were saturated for a long period of time, I would probably add at least 50% to that, if not double it, just to be on the safe side. So just like we do in situations where we have drought and crop loss, where we've got flooding and very saturated soils, you may want to rotate back to that same crop next year in some situations.
So when we talk about residual for herbicides, there are two things we're always discussing. One is how long will the herbicide actually kill weeds, and two, how long will it actually hurt the next crop. So in terms of weed killing potential, that runs out much sooner than any potential damage to the next crop.
Your crop rotational restriction to, say, pigweeds is probably very small, because most products, unless they've just been put on within the last month, don't have a lot of killing residual for pigweeds.
Stop. You just said crop rotational restriction to it. It's all different if you're talking about, are we going to raise a crop, or are we trying to control 100% of the weed species out there? For example, if I'm going to take this HPPD and I'm going to rotate to soybeans next year, I'm not trying to kill all the soybeans, but the thing is, I don't even want a tiny amount of damage. I can't even lose 2 bushels on my yield. So that's why we have to have all that extra time to make sure all the soil residual is gone. And all we're trying to say today is, if I was a farmer, and I am, I'm going to be much more concerned about residual carryover into this next crop.
When you think about the products that were applied in 2019, many of them were applied targeting our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.
I need results, so I choose the one system I trust to take weeds down and keep them down on even my toughest acres with the kind of yield potential that helps keep me in the black to deliver my kind of results season after season. I choose the Roundup Ready Extend crop system. I choose results.
It's been remarkable what we've seen out of the varieties of Extend soybeans. The yield has come through for us.
We had the best soybean crop we've ever had. The yields were there.
With the Roundup Ready Extend crop system, the yield boost and the lack of weed pressure really helps our bottom line.
The technology has exceeded my expectations. It's one thing that the industry has been looking for years.
There's nothing like harvesting record crops.
It starts with genetics, what you're made of. It takes agronomy. It's local. It's knowing your land and having the tools to put the right product in the right place. It's built on service with trust, grit, and determination. Because it turns out, what it takes to make the best product is a lot like what it takes to make a farmer. Golden Harvest, rooted in genetics, agronomy, and service.
Avoid dry run failures with the new Hi-Pro Force Field pump. Providing the ultimate protection, this wet seal pump will save you on costly in-season downtime to keep your sprayer running. Now all you have to worry about is the weather. Hi-Pro, helping you spray better.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
Last week on the show, we talked about fall nitrogen applications and just how careful you have to be. With phosphorus, it's a completely different discussion. We're going to talk about how you need to apply fall phosphorus in most cases.
Here's the big thing with phosphorus. It just doesn't move much in soil. Now, if you've got complete sand and a CEC of 1, you may disagree with me and say, well, I can get it to move a little bit, but I tell you what, if there is anything to your soil, if you've got a little bit of organic matter, if you've got a little bit of clay out there, this stuff just doesn't move. In fact, in our heavy soils where we farm and a fairly dry environment most years, we can't get phosphorus even to move a 1/4 inch. So we really need to put it where we want it. By placing it a little bit deeper, you can speed up the process by decades of moving phosphorus down.
The reason why I say we like fall applications of phosphorus is because it doesn't move in soil, it's great to just get this done. Now, the only exception would be if you're worried about soil erosion, because like Darren said, phosphorus doesn't move in soil. So if you lay your phosphorus on the soil surface and you don't till it in, well, now if you have any erosion, guess what's going to leave the field along with your soil? Your phosphorus. So we do like putting that phosphorus down in the ground, either injected or tilled in.
This is a really big deal for the no-tillers out there. Now, if you're in conventional till and you say, look, I'm going to spread it on top of the ground, I'm going to till it in 6 or 8 inches or even deeper, okay, you're moving most of that phosphorus down deep. But if you're in no-till, you absolutely have to inject it, put it on 2x2, something to protect that and get it down deep, because phosphorus is the limiting factor for algae growth in fresh water. If we have any of that phosphorus on the surface that erodes, that can cause a problem quickly.
One of the biggest questions we get with phosphorus is tie up in the soil. What can happen is if you have excess calcium or excess aluminum or iron, you can have tie up with that phosphorus, and all of a sudden you applied phosphorus, you spent money, and now it's not available for the plant. So ideally what we're looking for here is get your soil pH into the 6s, and now you're going to find more of your phosphorus is just available in your field. So that's what we're after. That way you'll have a lot less tie-up.
The other thing with availability, Brian, is getting it closer to the row. We've done a lot of banding of phosphorus over the years on rented ground. This is a great way. If you say, wow, phosphorus doesn't move, I don't want to put it out there and leave it for whoever's going to rent this ground after I'm done. I understand that. We've got ground like that. So we want to put that phosphorus a little bit closer to the road. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the furrow. It sure can be, but you can also put it over in a 2x2 or a 2x2 on each side of the row, or you can do strip till and place it throughout that root zone where you're going to be growing and just spread it out in your 8 or 10 inch wide strip.
One of the other important things you got to keep in mind here is, again, since phosphorus doesn't move in the soil like nitrogen does, or even sulfur or boron for that matter, your plants are not going to bring in all the soil's phosphorus in one shot. What I'm saying here is you have to have extra phosphorus there because your plants can't access it all right away. So if you need 100 pounds, you probably better make sure you have at least 200, 300, 400 pounds sitting there ready to go, available in the soil. What we encourage you to do first is take a look at the Ag PhD fertilizer removal app, put in your crop, and look at the total phosphorus that your crop is going to need for your yield goal. And then again, if it's me, I'm going to make sure I have plenty of extra out there, because phosphorus isn't just going to move around in the soil and your plants aren't going to magically find 100% of the soil's phosphorus.
Here's the other thing, Brian. Don't just look at NP and K on a soil test. You've got to look at the micronutrients and secondary nutrients too. For example, whenever I think about phosphorus, I think about zinc, because if we get a lot of phosphorus out there in our soil, we have to have a lot of zinc too. If they're not in balance, at least in a 10-to-1 ratio of phosphorus to zinc, we're going to have some issues. So if you're at a 30-to-1 ratio where you've got 30 parts per million of phosphorus, 1 part per million of zinc, you desperately need to get some zinc out there for this year's crop, and I would be applying that now as well.
And it works the other way. On our farm, what's happened is we have some areas where we have too much zinc in relation to the phosphorus. Well, as we get more phosphorus out there, our yields go way up. So make sure you're getting that ratio. Darren said 10-to-1. I'd say 8-to-1 to 12-to-1, somewhere kind of in that range. That's a pretty good place to start.
Well, phosphorus is a very important nutrient. Your crop needs a lot of it. As Brian mentioned, just go to the Ag PhD fertilizer removal tool, type in your crop and yield goal to find out exactly how much you need. We recommend placing it down into the soil, injecting it somehow to protect it from erosion and also to make it more available for your crop's root system.
Well, unfortunately, when you do a great job with phosphorus for your crop, you will also have done a great job of phosphorus and raising more of our weed of the week. But we'll tell you how to stop this tough weed coming up later in the show.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for springfield conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
Why do I farm? It's just something I've always wanted to do. Something I've known since I was my daughter's age. I think about what kind of farm I'm going to hand over to her. About how I can make it more successful, more sustainable. I talk to other farmers, with agronomists and advisors to help me make better decisions. To figure out what's working for them and how to make it work even better for my farm. Because when you farm, you have a responsibility to keep it growing. To look at a freshly planted field, a newborn calf, even your bottom line. Then ask yourself, how do I help this grow? How can I make it even more productive? I ask myself these questions every day. Because no matter what I'm doing, I'm still a farmer.
In 1949, Morton Buildings constructed our first machine storage building to establish our bond with the farming community. Since then, our relationship has grown, and so have our product offerings. From the smallest specialized operation to the largest agricultural enterprise, we understand the needs of your business and continue to evolve to meet industry demands. Plus, when you build a Morton building, you're backed by the strongest warranty in the business. To learn more about the Morton Advantage, visit mortonbuildings.com.
2019 was a terrible year for crop diseases, so today we're going to talk about how we can make 2020 a much better year and have fewer disease issues on your farm.
First of all, let's talk about crop rotation. This is one of those reasons why crop rotation makes so much sense. Let's say, for example, that you had Goss's wilt in corn. Well, if Goss's came in, it overwinters in your field in the residue. If you plant corn right away again in that field, if you get rainfall just at the wrong time and you have some damage to the plant, that splashes up on the leaves and you've got Goss's again if you're in continuous corn. Goss's does not impact soybeans. So if you put soybeans in that field, there is literally zero chance you're going to have Goss's wilt in your soybeans. Crop rotation can really be your friend.
Another thing that can help is tillage. Now this is one of the reasons, if you talk to people in our grandpa's generation, for example, they would say, hey, our only great way to control insects and diseases, and for that matter a lot of weeds, was full-scale tillage. So we're pulling out the moldboard plow, we're going to bury everything, and that absolutely can help. Now there are plenty of other issues with doing that full-scale tillage, but I'm just trying to say tillage absolutely can help reduce disease issues on your farm next year.
Let's talk about hybrid or varietal tolerance. So when you're picking your corn or you're picking your soybeans or whatever crop you're raising, the variety can make a big difference in terms of protecting you from certain diseases. I mentioned Goss's wilt before. Physoderma was a big issue in corn also this year, and picking that right variety can really help you. You've got natural tolerance for things that you may not be able to protect with pesticides.
I think my favorite all-time agronomic topic to discuss is drain tile. I love having great management of the water table out in the field, because when you do that, what you're going to find is a much healthier plant overall. All we're trying to do with water table management is have a proper amount of oxygen in the soil. And when there is a proper amount of oxygen in the soil, you will find bigger root systems, much more beneficial microbial growth in the soil. You just flat out have a healthier soil, which means you have a healthier plant, which means you're going to have fewer disease issues on your farm.
All right, now let's talk about some of the crop protection solutions. The first one I want to mention is seed treatment use. This was really key in 2019, and let's face it, 2020, it's going to be a big deal too. We're going to have some wet soils out there. It's going to be late in some areas before farmers are able to get in the fields. And whenever you're getting planting done late, it's because there's too much moisture. When there's moisture, there's often more disease that comes with it. Don't skip the seed treatment next year. In fact, go to the premium seed treatments. They made a huge difference this year and will again.
Yeah, so on our farm this year, we used 36 seed treatments on the soybeans. We used 33 seed treatments on the corn. If you do something like that, you're going to have a lot healthier plant. This is one of the reasons why our plants emerged faster, why they looked healthier all season long versus the untreated or the lesser treated. So, for example, here this fall, you're going to buy seed corn in most cases. All right, when you buy that seed corn, ask your seed dealer, how many seed treatments come on this seed? If they say 3 or 4 or 5, say, is there something else you can do? Because I want more seed treatments, I want more protection, I want more help against diseases and all the other problems that are going to come out there in my soil.
Of course, later on in the season, there are some foliar diseases that come in late. We can protect against those by putting a preventative application of a fungicide out there. What we saw this year was we needed at least 2 modes of action, if not 3. Many of those 3-way fungicides included a strobe, a triazole, and an SDHI chemistry. They worked really well, but the key is to get them out before you see the disease if you want the best protection.
All right, so fungicides absolutely can help, but the last thing I wanted to mention is, let's just talk about general fertility. I already said having drain tile out there and managing the water table, you're going to have an overall healthier plant. Same thing when you have the right fertility levels. It's just like you or me. If we take our vitamins every day, if we eat right, guess what? We're going to be healthier. Make sure you're looking at not just NP and K, but take a look at soil pH, look at base saturation, look at all your micronutrients. Do a good job balancing the fertility in your soil, and you will have a healthier crop and fewer disease issues.
Crop diseases were really a big deal in 2019. We expect them to be in 2020 as well, so take these steps to protect your crops. Also, another thing you want to do to protect your crops is control our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our weed of the week is wild buckwheat.
This is an annual weed, and I know I talk to farmers all the time that say, wait a minute, no, it's a perennial weed. It's actually not. If you're seeing a perennial weed that looks very similar to this, it's often field bindweed. When you pull up the root system and see that simple tap root, that's a pretty good indication you've got wild buckwheat, but it will vine out like field bindweed will, so make sure you're controlling it early, otherwise it gets to be pretty difficult to hit all those growing points.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. If you can get it small, control can be pretty good. I also wanted to talk about this weed today because we talk so much about these HPPD herbicides in corn, and they're great in almost everything except for these vine species like wild buckwheat. So if you want to use an HPPD in your farm, that wild buckwheat better be an inch or two tall, otherwise I wouldn't expect fantastic control.
The other product that really doesn't work well enough on wild buckwheat is Roundup. Over the years, we've just had a tough time controlling wild buckwheat with straight Roundup. We like some of the other chemistries a little bit better.
Yeah, so you can say, oh, this weed's developed resistance to Roundup. It always kind of had a good amount of tolerance. You can still kill wild buckwheat with Roundup, but it takes a tremendously high rate, and you got to spray when that buckwheat is tiny.
All right, Brian, I'm just going to cue it up for you because I know one of your favorite products, dicamba, has been one of the go-tos on this weed.
Well, yeah, any of these growth regulators are fine. You've got dicamba, for that matter, 2,4-D in a burn down situation. There's distinct in non-crop areas. There's status in corn. So all the growth regulators are really pretty decent, in my opinion, on wild buckwheat.
Okay, the only thing I like pre-emerge, though, like in soybeans, for example, has been using a little bit of Pursuit out there. So whether that's one of the Optil type products.
You said the only thing. That's not the only thing. We want you to use the 3 Pre's. Use a yellow, use Metribuzin, use Valor or Authority, but then
I'm just saying highly effective on a broadleaf weed like this. That's been my favorite. So having that in the mix, either pre or post, is a good way to go. Now, if you're going to spray post-emerge with something like Pursuit or Raptor, you've got to get out there really early when the buckwheat is really small. Then you're going to have some pretty good luck. If it gets a little more size to it in soybeans, I like to add some Flexstar or Cobra in there to help add some more burn.
Yep, in corn, I would probably start with something like Verdict. That'll be a pretty good way to go. And then post-emerge, I prefer Status.
In wheat, I like Sharpen and then come back with a high rate of Husky. That's been pretty good, although again, it has an HPPD component, so getting even a little bit more Buctril out there, maybe like in the old Dronate type products, would be just as good.
Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Engineered to be the most advanced concave system available, the XBR system threshes all crops, reduces grain loss, and significantly improves grain quality and storability.
Probably the biggest difference that we noticed right away was the grain quality. The sample was much better. With this XBR system, now we've cut down rotor loss significantly. I can switch out a 2-pound cover plate in just a few minutes and jumped about 30% more on our capacity.
Visit EstisPerformanceConcaves.com.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
Tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/agphd.
What's the most complex industry on Earth? It isn't big data or commodities, not genetics or meteorology or even logistics. It's a business that involves them all. It's farming. And we're proud to work with generations of American farmers in the most complex and rewarding industry on Earth.
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
At Harvest, you have one goal: finding the perfect flow of grain from the field to the bin. Case IH axial flow combines are engineered for matched capacity to deliver proven grain savings, so you can keep efficiency flowing smoothly. Find yours with the Case IH axial flow.
Harvest loss is very costly to farmers around the world. In soybeans, for example, our national average yield is around 45 bushels per acre, and the average farm has a 3 to 4% yield loss. In today's Iron Talk, we'll discuss how to determine exactly what that harvest loss is costing you on your farm right now. First of all, I'd recommend making a square for you to use in the fields while you're combining. Brian and I use 1-foot squares made out of PVC pipes so they're durable and hold up even with snow, rain, and mud. Second, download the free Ag PhD Harvest Loss app that we developed in conjunction with Case IH. Then head to the field. We'll talk about soybeans right now, but the same information holds true for a number of other crops as well. As I've already mentioned, on a 45 bushel crop, the average yield loss, 3 to 4%. That's about a bushel and a half, and at $9 soybeans, that's $13.50 per acre. On 1,000 acres, that's a $13,500 loss. Start by walking into any field you're harvesting and drop the square to the ground in an area that hasn't been harvested yet. Count the number of seeds on the ground, and then pull up the app and pick the crop that you're working with. Type in the current crop price, we'll use $9, and the number of seeds that you found in that square foot, 8. You can also adjust based on the seed size that you have. For example, big seed may be 2,500 seeds per pound, smaller seed, 3,000. In the small seed example, 8 soybeans on the ground per square foot is a 2 bushel per acre loss. If this loss is before you've run the combine, you got some big problems already with shatter. Then as you run the combine through the field, put the square down behind the combine to see total loss, place the square down, and then drive just the head of the combine over the area to see the loss at the head. By comparing all these things, you can diagnose exactly where your harvest loss is coming from. Again, download the free Ag PhD Harvest Loss app and use a 1-foot square in your field. The cost is just about zero, and the information you gain can save you thousands. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now, back to the show.
Before we sign off here today, we would just like to encourage you, check out the Ag PhD Insider magazine. We've got a lot of great agronomic information from Darren and myself and many other guest contributors. Every edition we have from Ag PhD Insider, you can go to agphdinsider.com to learn more.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.